All dissatisfaction comes from separation. There's a gap between reality and what we want reality to be. Dissatisfaction is a generic term that covers every unwanted experience from very mild unease to excruciating distress. Where does it come from? It comes from thoughts. That's why letting go of all thoughts undermines dissatisfaction. The more we accept what is, as it is, the less dissatisfaction we experience and the better we live. Thoughts require consciousness, but consciousness doesn't require thoughts. So it's wise to enjoy as much thoughtless, alert consciousness as possible. Instead of misusing our minds to generate thoughts that carve up reality into separate parts, we have the ability to use our minds correctly. We're not just ordinary subjects capable of consciousness of forms. We're able to step back inwardly from that and realize pure consciousness, which is what sages like David R. Hawkins and Eckhart Tolle both call the, quote, eternal subject, end quote, with a capital S. It's our essence. If you seriously ask yourself, who am I? You'll find there's no conceptually satisfactory answer. Philosophers have had lots of different opinions about that. Anthologies have been produced on the topic of self-identity with no agreement. There are two fundamental mistakes. One mistake is attachment to the thesis that to be real is to be material, physical. This metaphysical materialism is rampant among both scientists and philosophers. They deny subjectivity and try to reduce consciousness to matter. As long as they cling tightly to their beliefs, they'll continue to suffer from being blindness. The other mistake is trying to think being, which is impossible. Being is beyond all dualities, all classifications. It would be absurd to think it, for example, male or female, young or old, or anything like that. Being cannot be thought. Either one opens to being by dropping all thoughts or not. Yes, there are degrees of openness, but there cannot be even a glimpse of being without non-attachment, however brief. Being cannot be singled out or picked out for attention. It's not a form or object. That's why, if to exist is to be multiply single-outable, being cannot be correctly thought to exist. Existence is a concept, a principle of classification. It's applicable to some objects and inapplicable to others. Being, though, is beyond or above or behind all existential judgments, which are thoughts. It's beyond all conceptual intelligibility. It's impossible to talk about. There's also no conceptually satisfactory answer to the question, what am I? Words like being or presence, or phrases like the infinite subject, or the holy, or the divine, are mere pointers. If so, it's impossible to think who or what I am, and everyone else is in the same situation. Try thinking of living and becoming as like living with a completely cloudy sky nearly all the time. For most of us, though, we experience occasional glimpses of clear sky when the clouds part briefly. Even though we may live nearly all the time in becoming, it's normal occasionally to catch glimpses of being. However, such experiences are usually so infrequent and transitory that we quickly forget about them and don't understand their value. By way of contrast, sages live in clarity most of the time. Some live for decades in incessant bliss. There may be so little stress experienced by sages that they have much less need for sleep than the rest of us. Supposedly, for example, some sages, such as Ramana Maharshi, didn't sleep for decades. Without stress, there's no need to restore either body or mind. It may help to distinguish conceptual understanding from identity understanding. Conceptual understanding is understanding that something is the case. For example, if you apprehend that plant over there is an oak tree or that you are 6 feet tall, then those are commonplace classifications. Even if it's very unlikely that they are, they could even be mistaken. By way of contrast, if you directly apprehend your true nature as being, that apprehension is hardly commonplace. Its falsity would require you somehow separating from yourself, which is absurd. Identity understanding is understanding that what appear to be different forms or objects are really the same. If you're hungry for more fundamental understanding about identity, I recommend Butchforoff's books, Being Qua Being and Skepticism About the External World. It's true that you and I are human beings, but it's also true that we manifest being, that what we are, our essence, is being itself, or if you prefer, an emanation from being in the way that light emanates from the sun. Since being pervades everything, there's a sense in which everything is one and not merely interconnected. Even scientists now understand everything in the material or physical world to be interconnected. Ultimately, mysticism is correct. Essentially, you and I are not merely separable forms in becoming, but essentially inseparable, unified as being. That is the foundation of morality and genuine love. Unity is the foundation of morality. If you want more about this, I recommend my book, Love as Being. Genuine love is not simply attachment to something other. It requires recognition of essential unity. It cannot blossom in the truncated universe, which is the universe without consciousness. You may wonder why most people fail to open to being if it's our true nature. Some are just lazy. Others are fearful. Many, though, may just be ignorant. Here's an analogy that may help. Tola has used it multiple times. Describe your favorite room, or perhaps whatever room you're in right now if you're sitting in a room. If I were on the phone with you and unable to perceive your location, how would you describe it to me? Actually do it if possible. Pause this video. You'd surely describe its size, what's on its walls, the kind of flooring it has, its furniture, anything distinctive about its ceiling, and so on. Question: does describing its contents or its limits capture its essence? No. Its essence is space. Without space, there'd be no room. Everything else about the room depends upon its space, doesn't it? The room is a chunk of space. Again, though, it's impossible to single out a chunk of space, which makes it easy to overlook. No space, no room. Here's the takeaway. Every form depends upon being. There would be no forms without being. Ultimately, being is what all forms are, namely their formless essence. Being has many names, even just in English. Presence, stillness, emptiness, spaciousness, life. Permit me to read the first story in Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, which is a small collection. Its point is to direct the reader's attention beyond form. Here's the story. Quote, Nan-in, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, 1868 to 1912, received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nan-in served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he could no longer restrain himself. It is over full. No more will go in. Like this cup, Nan-in said, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? End quote. The last realization, emphasized by Master Huang Po, is that being or emptiness or spaciousness permits allness. That's why non-conceptually opening to being is so important. We don't really know ourselves or anything else without it. In other words, being isn't mere nothingness. It's a fecund, living vastness. If you drop thoughts and gaze inwardly, you'll find it. That's the justification for the famous injunction from ancient Greece, know thyself. Getting what we are permits getting what everything else is too. It's not easy to let go of all thoughts to realize that. It helps letting go to realize the unimportance of thoughts and beliefs that come from thoughts and emotions that come from thoughts. As Hawkins wrote in The Eye of the Eye, quote, all opinions are worthless. No such reality as that constructed by the mind actually exists. The purpose of meditation is to transcend the mind, end quote. Being is ultimate reality. Without getting that, we're stuck being confused and lost. Living is like trying to walk in a dense fog. Ultimate reality can be apprehended, but only directly and not by thought. This is, of course, controversial. Just thinking that possibility may stretch your mind, which may never resume its previous shape. How can it be? Suppose you believe it false that your essence is being. How could you be mistaken about that? Wouldn't your believing it make it true? No. That'd just be an example of being blindness, which is cured by surrendering or letting go of all thought, and so also all beliefs and emotions. Those who are visually blind may be wholly ignorant of colors, but that doesn't mean there are no colors. To cure ignorance of being, drop all thoughts to discover the light of consciousness on the other side of all cloudy, foggy, perspectival thoughts. In fact, you may have heard of a rather popular idea that's closely related to this. Let's discuss it briefly in the next video.